Claire Curran.
Mr Speaker, this bill could have been dealt with earlier this week alongside the other bill that's been dealt with. It's a basic bill and it repeals 31 acts which have expired in terms of their use. As the previous member has said, it will self-destruct after passing. And I would like to make the point that wouldn't it be good if more National Party bills did that? And if I'd had time, I would have put together a list of the ones that should have. We, Mr Speaker, we accept that acts proposed for repeal are spent, but as a number of speakers on this side of the House have pointed out, doesn't that government have anything better to do, and is this really a good way to spend Parliament's time? Mr Hyde, the Minister, said in his press release in December that through regulation government has the power to affect the lives of every New Zealander, yet this government's using its power to affect the lives of every New Zealander by repealing acts that have no effect whatsoever. Spent acts can be repealed without any practical consequences, and New Zealanders need practical solutions to the problems that they're facing. Labor welcomes regulatory reform with a balanced approach that's going to deliver solutions that work for businesses and ultimately benefit New Zealand economy as a whole. This is not regulatory reform, Mr Speaker, as the title purports. So, having made that point, I had a look at the 31 acts that are expiring, and I'd like to talk about one of them briefly. One of the acts that will be repealed under this bill covers an area that's very close to my heart, the New Zealand Railways. The District Railways Purchasing Act 1885 authorised Her Majesty the Queen to purchase certain railways within the Dominion constructed under the District Railways Act and the Railways Construction Acts. And I'd just like to read a paragraph out of the preamble. Quote, and whereas the companies owners of the railways mentioned in this schedule to this Act are desirous of selling their railways to the Government of New Zealand, and whereas it is expedient that the Governor should be empowered on behalf of Her Majesty to purchase the said railways in the manner provided by this Act. Mr Speaker, this bill might be 126 years old, but it does have symmetry with today when one reflects on the benefits of state-owned enterprises while this government plans to sell them off. There is a recession happening in this country. There aren't enough jobs. We need a plan for our economy. And that's what this government should be concentrating on. Instead, we've got this bill here before us today. Selling off our assets, that's their big plan. The asset sales will be great for foreign investors, but a disaster for Kiwis. And it will see power rises skyrocket as the new foreign owners push for bigger profits. Labor has said it will stop asset sales and keep our prize assets in Kiwi hands. So we already own them, so why sell them? The only long-term winners are going to be the foreign investors, and after 9 years in opposition and 2 years in government, that's their plan. National's model of mixed ownership means that the wider public interest that should be an essential requirement in terms of running New Zealand's electricity system will be surrendered to private investors, many of whom certainly don't have New Zealand's best interests at hand. And as my colleagues have pointed out before me, is this a step change in the economy? I don't think so. Mr Speaker, I do think that it is relevant in relation to this Act, which is expiring 31 pieces of legislation, one of which was about the purchase of New Zealand Railways, to talk about the importance of state-owned assets and the failure of this government to grow the export economy. which has been reflected to date in its appalling economic decisions, abolishing the R&D tax credit despite our demonstrably low private sector R&D spend, undermining KiwiSaver despite our poor record in savings, and falling at the last hurdle on ring-fencing property losses. Let's have a think about what they could do. And going back to this Act before us today and the bill I mentioned before, which I'll read the title of again, which was the District Railways Purchasing Act 1885, which is 126 years old. Mr. Speaker, New Zealand can only control its own future with strong, sustainable local industries, such as what was intended to do in that bill, which is being expired as a result of this bill before us today. And the government should be ensuring that we have them. Last year I released a private members bill which was put into the ballot called the Kiwi Jobs Bill, which aimed to maximise opportunities for competitive local businesses when tendering for large government projects such as providing work to our rail engineering industry in New Zealand, which is not a sunset industry, is an important part of our economy. And there's two significant places in New Zealand where rail engineering work is undertaken. One is the Hillside Workshops in Dunedin, just down the road from my office in Hillside Road, and the other one is the Woburn Workshops in the Hut. Sorry, I don't know the very high quality place, and I'm sorry I don't know the address off by heart, but I have been there, and they're both very good workshops, and they've got highly skilled people working in them, and it should be it's exactly the sort of thing that should be being supported by this government. The private members bill that I put into the ballot establishes a commission of inquiry to compare government procurement policies in Australia and other comparable jurisdictions. Mr. Speaker, I think that this has relevance.
No. Look, there is some flexibility in a first reading, but I actually would like you to come back and actually talk about what this bill is doing, because you're actually talking about a private members bill now, your private members bill, which is not part of this. So, and I have given you the opportunity to bring it back in line. You've got 2.5 minutes left, so I asked your remaining time to actually spend it on the bill, please. Claire Curran.
Mr. Speaker, the important point in winding up on that matter, the important point to be made in relation to the Regulatory Reform Repeals Bill and the 31 bills that are being expired under it, one of which is the District Railways Purchasing Act 1885, which is 126 years old, is that in 2011, Kiwi firms and the government of the day should be putting investment into Kiwi firms, and those firms should be given the best chance possible with full, fair and reasonable opportunities to compete for tenders in major projects. Labor supports this bill, but we consider it to be fairly I'm not sure what the right word is really, rudimentary, as it could have been dealt with, and the government could instead be showing leadership and providing stimulus to the economy. Instead, the House is fiddling about and not showing leadership. Real leadership, Mr. Speaker, is about hard work, not smiling and waving. It's about articulating a vision and delivering concrete changes to better the lives of this and future generations of New Zealanders. And it's something that has been absent for a long time on the National Party benches. So essentially, we support this bill, but we question whether it's really the best use of Parliament's time. Does this government have no better ideas than to repeal old legislation?
Aaron Gilmore.